Ever pondered about what goes on in the cockpit during a flight crisis? Let's rewind to a day that is etched in the annals of aviation history. The 12th of August, 1985, a day that started just like any other for the passengers and crew of Japan Airlines Flight 123. The flight was scheduled to take off at 6:12 in the evening, local time, from Tokyo's Haneda Airport, flying to Osaka International Airport. On board were 524 souls, 15 crew members and 509 passengers, each with their own stories, their own destinations. The aircraft, a Boeing 747, was a marvel of modern engineering, a symbol of man's triumph over the skies. As the plane taxied down the runway, the atmosphere inside the cabin was much like any other flight. The hum of conversation, the rustle of newspapers, the soft click-clack of seatbelts being fastened. The crew members, with their practiced smiles, were busy ensuring everyone was comfortable and ready for the journey ahead. The captain, an experienced pilot with thousands of flight hours under his belt, was at the helm. His crew trusted him, and so did his passengers. After all, flying had become so routine that it was easy to forget the sheer wonder of it. A metal bird soaring through the sky, defying gravity. But as we all know, even routine can be disrupted, and even the most ordinary of days can turn into something entirely unexpected. As the plane lifted off the tarmac and climbed into the sky, the passengers settled in for what they believed would be a short, uneventful flight. Little did they know that their faith in the routine, their trust in the familiar, was about to be shattered. Just like any other flight, the passengers of Flight 123 were oblivious to the impending disaster. 12 minutes into the flight, the calm was shattered. What was meant to be a routine journey turned into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. The first signs of crisis were subtle but disturbing. There was a sudden, inexplicable change in cabin pressure. The air felt heavy, dense, and the hum of the engines took on a frightening new tone. The alarms in the cockpit began to blare, slicing through the confusion and disbelief. Warning lights flashed in a dizzying array, each one signaling a different potential disaster. The cockpit was transformed into a hub of frenzied activity. The pilot and co-pilot, seasoned professionals trained for emergencies, found themselves in the midst of a crisis unlike anything they'd ever faced. Meanwhile, in the cabin, confusion gave way to fear. Seatbelts were hastily fastened, hands gripped armrests, and eyes darted towards the nearest exit signs. The reassuring routine of flight had been replaced by an unfolding drama of uncertainty. Back in the cockpit, the pilot and co-pilot were grappling with the controls, their hands moving with practiced precision despite the chaos around them. Their minds raced, processing information, calculating risks, and formulating a plan of action. They were in uncharted territory, navigating a situation that their training manuals had not prepared them for. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, steady but strained. He tried to reassure the passengers, his words carefully chosen to avoid panic, but also to prepare them for the possibility of the unthinkable. The co-pilot, meanwhile, was in constant communication with air traffic control, providing updates and seeking guidance. Their actions were a testament to their professionalism and dedication. Despite the fear, the uncertainty, and the gravity of the situation, they remained focused, their eyes fixed on the task at hand. Their priority was clear: to regain control of the situation and ensure the safety of everyone on board. Amidst the chaos, the crew of Flight 123 was tasked with a life-or-death decision. The next few minutes would test their skills, their judgment, and their courage like never before. The fate of every soul on board hinged on their actions. Imagine being in the pilot's shoes. What would you do? You're cruising through the sky, surrounded by an infinite expanse of blue, when suddenly, you're facing a situation that no pilot ever wants to encounter. The aircraft is in trouble, and the lives of hundreds of passengers are at stake. At this moment, the pilot of Flight 123 had a few options. He could try to make an emergency landing, even though the aircraft was in a critical condition. Or he could attempt to keep the plane in the air for as long as possible, hoping that the malfunction might somehow fix itself. The decision he made was to fight. Fight against the odds, fight against the failing systems, and fight for the lives of his passengers. He chose to keep the plane in the air, struggling against the laws of physics and the cruel hand of fate. As part of his efforts, the pilot tried to communicate with air traffic control despite the chaos that was unfolding. His voice, strained with the burden of responsibility and the fear of the unknown, crackled through the radio. He relayed the situation, desperate for any guidance that could help him navigate this crisis. The instructions he received were clear, but daunting. The air traffic control guided him to make a series of maneuvers, each more challenging than the last. Each command was a gamble, a roll of the dice in a high-stakes game, where the lives of hundreds of people hung in the balance. With each passing second, the gravity of the situation increased. The plane was losing altitude, the systems were failing, and time was running out. But the pilot kept on, determined to do everything in his power to save his passengers. In the end, despite his best efforts, the situation only got worse. The plane continued to plummet, the systems continued to fail, and the hope for a safe landing continued to dwindle. But the pilot didn't give up. He stayed at the helm, doing everything he could to control the doomed aircraft. The fate of the passengers was now entirely in the hands of the pilot and his crew. Despite all efforts, the situation was spiraling out of control. The atmosphere inside the cockpit was tense as the pilots grappled with the increasingly unstable aircraft. They fought to maintain control, their hands gripping the controls so hard their knuckles turned white. Sweat trickled down their faces, their breaths were erratic, and their hearts pounded in their chests. They were acutely aware that hundreds of lives depended on their actions. In the final moments, the plane began to descend rapidly. A chilling silence fell over the cabin as the passengers braced themselves for the impact. The ground rushed up to meet them, the landscape a blur of green and brown. It was a scene that would be etched in their memories forever. With a deafening crash, Flight 123 hit the ground. The impact was tremendous, scattering debris across the landscape. The once mighty aircraft was reduced to a mangled wreckage within seconds. In the immediate aftermath, the scene was one of utter devastation. The wreckage of the plane lay strewn across the landscape, a grim testament to the power of the crash. Fires blazed amidst the debris, sending plumes of black smoke into the sky. Emergency services raced to the scene, their sirens piercing the still air. It was a daunting task that lay ahead. The first responders battled the fires, their faces grim and determined. Each passing second was crucial as they searched the wreckage for survivors. The search and rescue operation was a monumental effort. For days, the teams combed through the wreckage, their hearts heavy with the weight of the task. They worked tirelessly, clinging onto hope, even as the hours turned into days. The crash of Flight 123 was a tragic event that shocked the world. It was a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of air travel, even with all the advancements in technology. It was a day of mourning, a day of loss, but also a day of heroism and resilience. It was a day that would never be forgotten. In the face of disaster, what lessons can we learn? This is the question that lingers as we delve into the aftermath of the tragic crash of Flight 123. When the dust had settled, and the initial shock had subsided, the painstaking task of piecing together the puzzle of the crash began. The investigators combed through the wreckage, analyzed the flight data, and pieced together the timeline of events. Their findings painted a picture of a series of unfortunate events, a ticking time bomb of mechanical failures that culminated in the tragic crash. The official report revealed a chilling fact: a fault in the aircraft's rear pressure bulkhead, a critical component that had been improperly repaired following a previous tailstrike incident. This, coupled with a catastrophic failure of the plane's hydraulic systems, sealed the fate of Flight 123. But the investigation did not stop at identifying the cause. It went further to examine the decisions made in the cockpit, the response of the crew to an escalating crisis. It highlighted the importance of effective crisis management and decision-making skills under pressure, factors that can make the difference between life and death in such scenarios. The crash of Flight 123 was a wake-up call. a stark reminder of the potential consequences of mechanical failures and inadequate response to in-flight emergencies. It sparked a wave of changes in aviation safety regulations worldwide. Safety checks became more rigorous, training programs for pilots and cabin crew were overhauled, and emergency procedures were revised and updated. The aviation industry as a whole took a hard look at its practices, striving to ensure that such a tragedy would not happen again. Every disaster, as bleak as it may be, carries within it lessons to be learned. In this case, the lessons were about the importance of meticulous maintenance, the necessity of comprehensive training, and the crucial role of effective decision-making in crisis situations. These lessons, learned at such a great cost, continue to shape aviation safety standards today, making air travel safer for us all. The crash of Flight 123 serves as a stark reminder of the heavy responsibility shouldered by those who navigate our skies.